earlier tonight, like an hour ago, but the battery failed, and I'm not sure if it's gonna upload. So I was gonna start all over, and I might recap some of those points. And I don't know if that had any viewership or if it'd be returning. So I don't mean to be redundant with that, but I just want to keep the train of this channel going, and continue to offer value and esteem and insight as it occurred to me, and have value for its own sake. A lot of times, I guess I'll start this one by saying that, like, a lot of times the exception proves the rule. So what most people think of and what's appreciated as being like worthless or futile or even a little bit taboo, it may be that, or it may appear that way to a lot of people, and then thereby be that way because appearance is a lot of value is in appearance, and a lot of value is in appearance, not entirely, but appearance and congruence is a lot of value, and so the market kind of, not only the market of not only the market of wares, and the old wares is like if you remember like the film Aladdin, when they're going through like, ooh, look and see it would have this the like he has this little bag full of stuff. Those were wares he had. So like that, your older markets were about wares, and people who still know what's up are about wares. Like my dad's old school like that. He grew up in Africa back in the day on reservations in Africa, similar to reservations in America. And they jacked with wares, like anything that that's useful, and it didn't matter where something came from. It matters how good it was. So my father grew up with a lot of respect for American things, like just even American brands, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, the Beatles, Ford trucks, Mercedes from Europe, anything that's well made. That's what they really appreciated. My estimation from hearing my dad, but then also growing up around some African people, is that they really appreciate things that are well made and well done. And they're not a respecter of regions. They're a respecter like of value, is what I get from my dad. Um, but not saying that I take after him, but that's what I can read off of that. That had been value in the past, but now a lot of those wares, like you can procure a lot of things more simply, and even probably more. I don't know. I'll get off into the weeds if I say things are more economical to procure now, but you can get a lot of things that you could not before. But it's interesting that um, the modern paradigm of digital shopping that makes things available, it actually came from books, like because you had bookstores that were prolific in the 20th century, and I've made other commentary that there was some video I watched back in the day that referenced that traditionally, historically, statistically, if you appreciate where bookstores are located in any city, and the preponderance of bookstores and the success and the traffic of bookstores going back, that would actually dictate certain trends and statistics of both positive, affirmative, and detrimental, would be the presence of bookstores. And it's interesting that that's exactly what there's some of the great people. These videos tend to fail in uploading, or when they're being ran back, they tend to, with the content I make, it tends to upload if I reference any mogul or any person or business directly. But it can be appreciated without much extrapolation, that a lot of the paradigm for it really upscaling consumer buyer power, but also buyer satisfaction, as that has to do with like rapid transit of goods and services, or wares particularly. That would be your that was modeled, that came about at the early onset of the online. Some of your first great pioneers in online shopping that were great then and now, they were actually began as replicating book uh, selling of books, and making books available, and so they actually gave a lot of competition to the bookstores, and then soon displaced and unseated them. And now, if you go past a bookstore in a lot of areas, they probably get a lot of traffic. Like, some people might not bat an eye about going to a bookstore, but actually I would imagine that a lot of people that tend to frequent bookstores, just very rough estimation, I'd imagine that there are people from the old guard that never came all the way on board to the online, or that's just a lot of who they are and were and are, was to go to bookstores, or maybe very young people that don't know the difference yet, and they don't really know what online is about, would be like people that are still mess with that, not mess with, but still appreciate bookstores and don't know any different, would be like probably very young people, and then old people, or not old, or seasoned people, and then some unique people along that spectrum. But beyond that, a lot of people like bookstores really, they don't mean what they used to mean, because like they used to really be kind of cool. Like there, that was actually kind of a spot. Bookstores were like a spot to meet people, a spot to hang out. They're still like that low key, but it's kind of like the second thing you think to do. So you go somewhere and, oh yeah, there's a bookstore. What's up with that bookstore? But you don't. It's not. It doesn't have the same meaning, I don't think. Um, but I bet that whatever metrics that used to be contingent upon bookstores, they'd probably be similar, but dispersed and sublimated, or sublimated, like when water goes into steam. Like if you have ice cubes and then you boil them and they become water, and then they become steam. When they went from either water into ice cubes back into water, and water into steam or back into ice cubes, that's called sublimating. So it's sublimated, and it's not different. It's not different, but it's another version. It's another iteration of itself under different conditions. So I guess things don't really change. Like I had a friend I grew up with who would say really deep and solemn things as children. Like he'd say, he said, "What doesn't my one time my dad told me that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger." He said that like that was his dad's original words, but that was actually, I think that was the great Nietzsche, had said that like 100 years prior to that. That was like in the late '90s. He said that, so Nietzsche would have said that like in about the 1890s. But he said that and he meant that, and he's congruent in that statement. But he also said some things never change. And if you think about it, a lot, it's been, there's a video about a very young person. He was this young person was he appeared. There's a video that appears of a person talking about what he's talking about. I think he's talking about relativity. He's talking about some of Einstein's theories. He was a very young, he was a boy, a high schooler when he made that, and then he had some virality with that, and then I think he had some unique circumstances in his life. But when you listen to him talk, he has mannerisms that would remind you of someone that was both gifted and intelligent. And I actually met people like him when I was a boy. I at some of these schools I went to in elementary, there would be local colleges and universities, one which my father actually taught at. My presence at that school was a function of my father being recruited and landing his first job as a professor, an adjunct professor in the late '90s. But then that very school would come over to the school I grew up at, and it's a historical famous school in the area where I've lived a long time. And they would actually they would have oversight on they'd have oversight and influence on our very textbooks, and they would venture and actually beta tests. They were actually doing beta tests of curriculum on us as students, as a local nearby elementary adjacent to a famous historical what's the word for it, it's a certain kind of college. It's a Jesuit college, because they train a lot of priests. And actually, the home I grew up in, it was a venue. It was near venues for uh, uh, religious sororities, and actual clergy members would be living there at different times. Not while I was there, but they would be in and out those places. Um, but uh, dang, I lost that train of thought. But um that I was saying something about that school. But there'd be a couple of students at that school that I grew up at, and these students were there. I was already in sixth grade. I came there as a sixth grader, but these two boys I can think of, they were already way past high, they were beyond high school level math and off into college level math as sixth graders, and that would blow us away. Like as kids, we're like, damn, like there's just another way you look at people. Like I was arguably, but I had, if you would have polled all the boys and girls at my elementary school, they would have said that I would have been the strongest basketball player there, because I grew up around a real basketball culture in New Mexico. The whole '90s was like a movement. It's hard. I think you can't really know. You think you know about like people like Jimi Hendrix, and you hear that name Jimi Hendrix come up, and you may or may not know how great he is, and you may or may not like his music. But I gather, and I think that he would really have to be you'd really have to be around him at that time to know what that was about. But for me, I was equally inspired by John Frusciante. I think he was the second guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers back they began in the '80s. Like you had Anthony Kiedis, the main singer then and currently. You also had Flea, which is like the bassist then and currently. You had this cool drummer guy. He didn't even look as much like a musician. He just looked like a cool guy. Like but he would be the drummer then and now. And then I think their original guitarist, he passed away of an overdose. But according to them, they were doing a lot of hard stuff then. That would go with the scene of that type of music in that genre in that time back then. But then they got a young guitarist named John Frusciante, and I'm just shouting him out because someone actually asked me tonight. I was wearing a guitar because I was taking it to be repaired, and someone's like, "Hey, who's your favorite guitarist?" I was like, it's a toss up between me, myself, and I. And then, but he was actually I could tell he was a real type of rock and roller. He was a real dude. Every once in a while, you flirt with something, you brandish something, and you actually bump into the real McCoy like that. And so he was actually a real person. So I gave him a real answer. I was like, uh, my favorite guitarist was John Frusciante because I went off into a rabbit hole watching videos about him, like in the like about just about 10 years ago, right about just 10 years and a couple months beyond 10 years ago from now. I had been working really hard, and then I took like a month hiatus to figure out what I wanted to do because I had been having inspiration about music, and I just went off into this deep kind of. It was almost like it would have been a dark binge rabbit hole, but it wasn't counterproductive because I'd watch like episodes of the Red Hot Chili Peppers interviews from like the '90s, and then it was already like that had already been they were already about 20 years, 20 to 25, 15 to 20 to 25-year-old interviews, maybe some a little bit less than that I was watching then 10 years ago from now of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and you can just get lost in that. And I would be drinking tea, but like my family would have like these assorted things of tea, and I'd be drinking all this tea like that, watching it, and then when it'd be like barely decent enough to go outside, like the wee off hours of the night, I'd run over to like the local RX store that's open all night and get something like a little stronger, like some energy drinks, just because it's just my habit. And then I go back and watch those films like that. And it's kind of a strange place that I was at. It's almost like a little bit of purgatory. If you can imagine purgatory for an artist and a working person and a student and a young man, and just a person at all, that was like a little bit of a purgatory phase. But I was jacking and rocking with that. And John, if you watch, there's some interviews by John Frusciante on. I think there's a lot of them that exist about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he appears. But there's like a Dutch company that came from Deutschland, Amsterdam. I think that refers to Amsterdam, and they're called VPRO, and they came to Los Angeles to visit John Frusciante. And it's interesting that it's almost like it's a little bit like a wormhole because they visited John Frusciante when he himself was on a hiatus from the Red Hot Chili Peppers at that time in the '90s, like the mid '90s, early to mid '90s, and he himself and I was binging tea. Too much of anything's bad for you. I was binging just straight tea, like herbal tea and regular tea, like in those assorted packs. But he had been binging some really really hard stuff, and he was actually going through some of those creative and substance fits, not fit as in not handling himself, but he'd just be like zoning out and like not, and he was actually he didn't he was zoning out, but he was cognizant of where he was, what he was doing, and that he was being interviewed. And you see some of the realest things, like so he was like he's like they said something about dying and death. He's like, I don't think death is a big deal. Everyone's gonna die. And then he was like, but like he was talking about how but the other the drummer Flea, like I'll sometimes, and this actually goes to my point, but he's like I'll be hanging out. I think that my drummer Flea, his daughter, I think that she's the most intelligent person I've ever met. That I think she's actually a genius, and he meant that. But some of the things that he said, and then later after that, like 5 to 10 years after that, I would have experiences rearing and spending time protecting and leading and safeguarding and inspiring children and somewhat eruditing children when where the opportunity would take form, like teaching children what M&M stands for, or what okay means, or when like you have Sunday as the first day of the month, that means you have a Friday that's something on your hands. If your Sunday's the first day, I would get opportunities to do that. But and then also I grew a lot as a person. Like some of my facility, like with being verbal, like in these video forms, and also like bantering. I have a different people. I've made other statements on this channel that different people in scenario situations bring out a different disposition in a person. So I have a lot different demeanor and bearing when I bump into people abroad normally, and sometimes it go over well and don't. But I'm more so engaged with humor. But I grew a lot as a person and a man, and also as an artist and a guitarist, as I never had before. Once I started actually safeguarding children, and some of it came from the fact that he made that statement, is that this child of his band member, who would have been very young at that time, barely like toddler, very young, was the most of intelligence that he had experienced. And if you look at him in those videos, some of the statements that he makes in those V Pro interviews, that's some of the deepest revelatory statements that you can hear from another human being, and that to an artist, that he himself was making. But it take one to know one, and then he could recognize that in the child. But according to Osho, that child that he was appreciating, he himself, for appreciating that child, and to neither that child would have been unique, in that, according to Osho, a human being is just simply brilliant at essence, at nature. Human being, life itself, essence itself, life itself, is simply brilliant and sublime and wonderful and enlightening, without having to go on top of a mountain. But we more so get trained out of that. We get actually detrained to our instincts, our passions, our interests, our creativity, our strength, even some of our maybe our weaknesses and detriments that could redouble and help us, because people have an already form-fitted, preconceived idea of what they would like for us, but that too, for us, stratified in a broader spectrum that is arbitrarily form-fitted and amounts to privilege and entitlement. So when children are being raised, we ourselves in this society, modern, the West, but also the West has hegemony that's like overwhelming, preponderant, ubiquitous, and inordinate influence the world over now. And anything that would be different than that or away from that, it's very difficult to not have to contend with the Western hegemony, even if a person would mean to. So when you contend with something, you're still actually a function of it, and almost like a negative function, not negative as in bad, but a negative function or a counter function. I'm kind of just ballpark. I'm kind of taking those, pulling those state. Those are not definitive terms. I'm just saying, if you react to something, you're still actually part of that's your reaction is a function of what you're reacting to. So it's difficult, not impossible, but near impossible to get away from Western hegemony. But Western hegemony itself is to stratify human beings, and that is to rank off human beings. But that very ranking is a part of the mode and the function of keeping the status quo and the modus operandi. I think that's how it's when you say MO, or that's that full MO. I think MO means modus operandi. The mode or the habit, the way your habit ordering yourself is what MO means. But the Western MO is to have privilege and entitlement and rank, because that's how you disperse both the duties and the privileges. And the way we exist now, it requires, it affords, and it demands, and it confers, and it deprives privilege and entitlement. But privilege has a negative aspect too. You have like a positive privilege, an affirmative privilege, and then also your privilege to serve, which is still privilege, and that too, as it serves you and doesn't serve you. And that's like what the West is and tries. That's what the West has intended. But all of that, it amounts to a form of violence upon human beings, even human beings that get the better end of it, and such that human beings are just, according to Osho, human beings are simply brilliant as we come into this life, and maybe as we go out of it and part way through it, we're brilliant, and it just simple intelligence. Simple intelligence is the greatest intelligence. We're simply intelligent and simply beautiful and simply wonderful our whole life, until and unless we're being geared away, actually browbeaten and intimidated, and uh, um, the way that we grow up, it's kind of overbearing, and it kind of, it dulls or dilutes our real intelligence, but it's always there. And sometimes I think, like substance, the reason that substance feel profound is that the substance it's actually dulling the dulling that society has. So when a lot of times the antidote to a poison is yet another form of poison, a better, well-suited poison is the only way to dispense with poison sometimes. Or like according to Arthur Avalon, when a person fall on the ground, they have to lift themselves up back by means of that same ground. So when life, when the dominant overbearing status quo values are foisted or forced upon a person, a child, because people are being hauled off, dragged off to school by their parents and community members since they're very young. That amounts to a form of dulling. Even things that make you seem more intelligent or more knowledgeable can yet be dulling you all the while, even with that very intelligence and knowledge. If it's not a knowledge, if it's not your intelligence or your knowledge that you have found or at least sought or looked into or chosen to undertake. But then sometimes the substances can dull that. So it brings out what remains or what may be latent of you, but it may not also be the strongest version of you because it's yet subject to and a function of that substance, which is subject to and a function of the actual politics at play and how the entire earth is now the earth is is seat of the earth has been overlain and seized such that anything that's on the earth is likely upon the terms of other men and women, mankind, such that you're engaging with anything. It's a function of other people's interests, and from that standpoint, it's a little bit corrupt. Because like even now, as a lot of substance has become legalized, were you to procure it, whatever means you would procure it with, and how it has been procured and presented to you and rendered to you, that's a function of deeper interests that amount to profit, and so it's skewed ever so slightly, and that can impact the experience and the reality of that. But John Frusciante was talking about what he thinks is genius, and that's just a small child is genius like that. But also that child he was child, and according to the YouTuber, just in being honest and transparent, Tony Gaskins, he's a relationship coach, but also a brilliant person and a student of like human beings, like socializing. And he would say that from his experience, I think he's more familiar with raising male children, but he appreciates that there can be some distinctions in like in the development of female and male children. And I think most people could appreciate that. Like I bet you, like anyone watching this, right? When you're in school, like you're probably the whole way through school, even through college and beyond, but especially like in school, right? Like imagine like first, second grade, right? Everybody got to take a test together, right? Or everybody got to do a project, right? And like the teacher talking, and then we all get to work. Everybody shut up now, right? If you're messing up or you're lollygagging, the teacher's gonna, hey, get back to work, buddy. But other than that, it's silent, right? So it's silent, but we can all appreciate what everybody's into, how confident people are engaging it, because you can. Here's this one. Here's this one. You can tell how well people are doing. But the first one, I'm done, waiting for all these other kids to get done, was it not likely the female student? There probably would have been some boys right up there, not far behind, but it's likely a lot of the female student that would be achieving that first. And according to Tony Gaskin, is that there can be some salient differences in the mental gifts or development of a female child versus a male child. And if you think about it, back in the day, like not very long ago, and all the way to ancient times, there would have been different rigors. Just like as adults, there's different rigors, demands, and blessings and accommodations afforded to and respect and honor afforded to men and women. But back in the day, actually, just like there's a lot of mean things that is kind of a little bit unfortunate that children have to sustain as much toil as it takes to get through a day of school when that's otherwise their childhood. Back in the day, it probably wouldn't have necessarily been any easier. And sometimes I think people specifically had children like on farms so that they could get the work power, because you wouldn't be viable with a farm unless you had a lot of children. So sometimes back in the day, there would have been more of a stigma about having and not having children. So having children out of wedlock would have been a lot of backlash, but also not having children would have been backlash. But there likely was an economic component that people think that, oh, we're just having children to have children because they're so sacrosanct and beautiful and wonderful, which they are. But there's always you follow the money to things. So there's actually a financial incentive in having children of your own, or even like in the times of like feudalism and heaven forbid slavery, there would have been an impetus to have children born and um, to to have there would have been an impetus for that, but also different rigors upon those children. But then it's also appreciated, and one thing that is very contentious, a lot of people don't appreciate statements like this, but there's it can be appreciated that there's some differences in the maturation of both men, male and females as adults, where a lot of times like just like I've appreciated that sometimes female children, they can be more cognizant of their environment and of people's demeanor and intentions and sub communication. They're just more cognizant. Like when I was a child, I would grow up around a lot of girls, and like they girls be like, "But why are you doing that?" No, no, but why would you do that? Like they can actually, they'd be more, they work for that as like pragmatic, that they'd be more sensible about things, where boys are a little bit more romantic and idealistic. And then like Osho would say, like an example of that in an adult would be like, someone comes home, hey honey, I just got recruited for NASA. I'm gonna start training to go to the moon, and I'm gonna be the 13th person to ever walk on the moon. But what are you gonna do on the moon? Like that's some of the difference in like the way of seeing things between a male and a female that can be appreciated humorously. But also it's been said that like if a woman is like say just barely of majority in early 20s, that woman is impressive and has a bearing and stature even among uh already accomplished seasoned men and women. Like it's funny because like a lot of times like you'll see like I'll just see like a lot of females like, and I don't I'm a decent person towards other people, and I take care of myself, and I've improved on certain metrics. But a lot of women, they're just like they'll be like, except for like special occasions when something's special, a lot of women will just be like kind of ho hum like around me, another guy like that. But then when just another regular female comes in, you see a completely different disposition wash over that woman, and the woman actually has an interest. According to Zan Perian has a beautiful book called The Alabaster Girl. It's a book of a former ladies' man, not ladies' man in terms of favors of women or like exploits of women per se, but it's more so of appreciating the beauty of women and the women in his life, in his ideas. And that very book, it's another way of looking at life, just similar like how a woman would look different at like the prospect of going to a moon. That book has you look at women and females differently, that to get through that book by Zamparian. And it's beautiful poetry par excellence because it really changed your outlook. But what he says is that if you get a bunch of guys off by themselves, you get the guy, which is the guys night, right? They don't even have to go around other ladies, but just you get the guys together, right? Even like you get some things have always been around. So you have like men's right activists, and now you've had acronyms that start with M for like men's things, but they're talking about women that whole time. Likely that's like the most moving thing, the most bonding thing, that so guys get together to bond, but what do they bond over? Talking about women. But then you get ladies together and they get together to bond, but what do they bond over? And what are they interested in talking about? Other women. And they say that sometimes when women are like, so like I do like a lot of stuff like with style and stuff like that. I just actually got I got $11 back today for something I had consigned. I had some clothing like sit that's one way you know if your clothes are getting traction, is that like when they're there sitting somewhere, a complete stranger will pick your same garment out of this many thousands of garments right there. But a lot of times, like when ladies are so interested in fashion, even at different like, because a lot of times, like when ladies are like in their, you get ladies almost. If you go into, it's interesting if you go into a consignment store and appreciate who would be savvy enough to be there, who would be interested to be there. You have a mix of men and women, but a lot of the men you would see in there, you don't see like a lot of really young men in there unless they're with girls. There a lot of people, men that would be in there are like savvy men, like a little bit of dandies, like men that would be hip to things, that would be hip to style. But you see all kinds of females in there. You see very young, teenager, adult, seasoned adult, a little bit older, matronly, grandmotherly, all them ladies in there, and they're interested in them clothes. But a lot of those ladies, like by and large, overwhelming, Those ladies aren't just in there getting cool clothes because they want to get lucky with some guys like that, or they want to get attention from some guys. Yes, they want to get attention from guys, but that too, to get to present that attention to other ladies. So a lot of this thing to do about clothes for ladies is also for other ladies, according to Zamparion. But so we're all really actually interested and compelled by ladies, ladies included, and heterosexual ladies included, are compelled by ladies. Um, but but so um um but that he would point, but so I think that, but males are a little bit more idealistic and romantic, even to the point of being futile and redundant, and a little bit like hopeless and trifling. But it's not hopeless, but it's hopeless without being without hope, because a lot of the things that would really be hopeless about a person, if they're really you and you stick it out longer, it has like a half-life, or like a bell curve, where it can flip the other way and really start to serve you and impress other people if you were to really ride it all the way out. Because like when I was growing up back in the day, I wasn't. I had like I got off into video games a little bit in high school, because I had culture shock. I had went from the north to the south, and I'd be around a lot hopeless and trifling. That was, yeah. A lot of us we're so trifling until, like, damn, he's over. He got over with that one. That's actually then you start to. It's kind of funny, right? So like you're watching somebody work, right? You're watching somebody work. You're like, according to Arthur Avalon, when you're idle, like when you're idle, you're not doing anything. You have a little bit of you appear omnipotent, and omniscient just by your idleness. Whatever would afford you the ability to stand still. Like I was at a local shop. I was at one of your box chain stores today, because I was looking for some opportunity for delivery work, and you got the law enforcement there, and they're like some linebackers, right? Like you imagine, like they probably recruit some linebackers to be law enforcement because they're sturdy around athletics. They're just waiting by the exit. Yeah, just tackle that fool, man. They're not off in the store. They're not spying on people. They got eyes in the store probably. And yeah, when that dude try that, then they come by. They come by the back, or they come by the front door, and we about to tackle them like that. So they're ready to go. They're good to go. You can tell they've been out the gym. They're not, but sometimes I think they don't actually got the ups like that, right? Because if you every once in a while you heard like my mom or my brother come home from the store like, man, that fool was booking, man. They didn't even see that shit, that dude was booking out of there. So like they're like them linebackers like that. They're standing around, and then because they're already going through, right. Things been real for the last 6 months, last year. They already knew they're about that smoke, and they're not going to give them a chance to start. But that don't mean they're getting past some guards, because in football, like a lot of football is about standing around that whole time. But then, yeah, we're standing around, yeah. Then okay, get down, hike. Then we're going. So they're just out there waiting to tackle somebody, but they kind of like standing around like that. Those guys like that. But imagine you were with some people, you're just standing around while somebody work, right? You're like, you're a little bit smug or not. You're like, okay, yeah, man, this and that. You're not paying attention, but you're like, oh man, that fool, he actually kind of worked. Like, oh damn, man, that boy working, man. Oh shit. He just got a look from old girl too. Oh shit, he didn't even worried about it. Oh shit, he didn't even really like bad and I. Oh man, damn. That starts to make you feel a certain way. So it's everything's trifling until it ain't trifling no more. Like, look at that fool. What do you think he up to? Then after a while, it's like, oh snap, snap. Damn, he making us look bad, man. Hey man, why? I bet you can't do that. The way you know you're really rocking with something is people start fighting around you and shit, right? So I was. How many? So you want to flex, right? How many do you know walk up into like a Harley dealership, right? Because you actually did a sturdy deal. It wouldn't kill no weird. It's water under the bridge. It's all chocolate the growing pains, right? But you're like, damn, how am I about to do some deliveries, man? What about a damn motorcycle? I knew how to ride bikes as a kid. What about how much do a dirt bike cost right now? So you go check out the cheapest dirt bike. Where do they got that one at? Oh, it's on the outside of town. Okay, you get there, it's the official good to go Harley boy, the Harley boy like that. You getting there to say what up to the Harley boy like that. But you've been keeping up with your style moves and stuff like that. You've been keeping up with your style moves so much that when you walk in there, because now it ain't just style. Like you got to get your rapport and your banter down, and you got to be able to stick your foot a little bit in your mouth without getting stuck in there, right? Stick your foot in there without sticking both feet in your mouth at the same time, right? So you get on, you say what's up to the high boy. They hear you on the phone. They're not sure if you're actually going to show up. You show up. Hey, are you this guy? Oh, hey, but you brought a guitar. They weren't looking for that, right? Because you bring a guitar damn well everywhere you go. They weren't expecting that one with the guitar. Oh, this was a little bit different with the guitar, and he got the hair like that, and he talking smack. And that was a little bit of a zinger, right? Oh, and he just said that to the boss lady. Like he just not being egregious, right? But just talking, like he just got one past the boss, right? Then you didn't know the head honcho guy. He's also a sneakerhead like that, right? The one of the main type boss dudes in there, a real sneaker dude, right? You can't hide certain things about you. The dude just simply a sneakerhead. You could see that about the man. He worked at a Harley shop, this and that, but he ain't jacking with no boots. He actually got him some like some low dunk, some dunk lows, right? But you actually know the name of that colorway that he got on right there, right? Now you're starting to get a type of way. Then you get all the way past this and that. They show you something that wasn't on the floor, this and that. They check you out on paper. They didn't know you had actually been a school bus and 1099. Okay, we gave you a look like this. Then they start getting to fighting and stuff, right? Like the actual dude that brought you on, that courted you on, that gave you the softball lob to look decent in front of these dudes. They're like, yeah, man, no, but why'd you say that? Like, no, I was just saying he seemed like he had been on a motorcycle before. So what? Like no, he didn't like say something out of pocket like that. But it's kind of like what you will notice is like when you really start like imagine like you go on the bus, right? Like you got people in the back. Like normally you might be like intimidated by some people that you don't know, right? But people like what was cool, right? So you get on the bus, right? And you just got out the salon, right? The way you might know that old girl hooked you up in the salon is like you're there, you're minding your own business, and then they're in the back, man. Hey man, why you gotta be so ugly and shit, man? Why can't you be a little bit cooler like that? Why can't so people get to fighting like that? But it's the same way like with working and trifling is that everything is trifling. Everything you do is interesting, is trifling until at a certain point everything has like a the exception proves the rule. So it's like here go this trifling dude, man. Everybody got something to say. This dude bogus, but he's sticking with it. He's already down bad, but he ain't break though. He ain't break though. And then he got a look like that, and then he figured out something, and then he met that one, and then he bumped into that one, and then he also did that, and then you didn't know that he was about to come with that one time, and then he looked like that, and then that one said that, and then that he's starting to get so he can flip the script. But like back in like in the day, like a lot of people they would give people a hard time about video games and I wasn't like a big video gamer, but some of them video games they'll get anybody. You play with that enough, you play, and you got a problem now. So you play with someone enough, you got a problem now. You play, so it could be with video games back in the day, but back in the day, people weren't respecting people with video games. But I bet you, if you would have been a kid in the '90s or early 2000s, you play with video games. Everybody don't respect you, even some of your own family like that. But then now they got this tournament over there. You didn't know they got like you got a tournament. It only happened once a year, right? But you've been playing that damn game because you like it that much, and you're not batting an eye that people got a problem with you like that. Now all of a sudden there's an opportunity to show your chops because you do something good. Everybody, you can do anything you want to do. You don't want to gotta do anything you don't want to do, but it would behoove you to be good at something. That is to stay true to something. It would, even better than how much talent is to stay true. So you stay true to video games in and out of season, or when it had not yet, there wasn't a way for it to be in season. Now you're actually starting to get some looks. Now there's actually like an audience for that. Now there's actually damn that fool just made $1 million. Everybody made $1 million before. Someone made $1 million doing something, but that fool made $1 million off a video game like that. You were clowning that dude with the video game, but now you also got to go to work, and he just made $1 million, and now they're serious about it. No man, we're gonna need you to play the video game, man. How come this is a team, man? How come you weren't at the video game practice today, man? Practice? We're talking about video game practice. No, man, not to take a shot at your boy AI. I was just being humorous with that. But man, how come you weren't at the video game today, man? What's up with that, man? You know we got the tournament, man. You guys supposed to be playing video game. You at work? Why are you at work today, man? What the hell are you gonna do at work, man? What's work gonna do for you when your boss start tripping, man? You need to be playing the video games over here, man. You need to get your priorities straight. Start playing with the video games, man. And then you start getting attention like that too, man. And then now you might get courted onto like some kind of venue, something that only happens once a year in California. And they also got the baddies right there. As much of baddies as they got around golf, they got around certain things not far away from video games like that. But if you slip up on the video games, you stop playing video games. So this life, it comes with what you're good at. So you're good at that video game stuff. You stop playing video games, you ain't up to speed anymore. You start to lose your chops because you ain't up on the video games. What's up with you got your priorities straight? Yeah, what are your priorities right now, man? You ain't playing video games, man. So I'm just being a ham, but that's how trifling you can look until you make somebody else look trifling for making you look trifling. But I was saying that but so um but So this John Frusciante, if you watch him in the V Pro of the '90s, those interviews with him, he was going through like a little bit of a it would look like a dark area, but he was actually creative there. He was being very creative in the darkness because the darkness can make anything's possible. Actually, all of this life, according to Osho, it comes from darkness in the first place. So like a seed, it starts in darkness. A human being starts in darkness. Anything that we have of life, you could maybe wherever we don't much talk about where the sun came from, but wherever it came from, it likely be darkness and still actually a function of darkness from that standpoint. The actual sun itself may be a function of darkness. What actually chases the sun? What inspires it? Because the sun, according to I had a conversation with Todd Streak Bay, and he says that the earth, it doesn't actually spin around the sun, it eddies behind the sun. So the sun itself is propelling through space. The sun is going like this, and then our planets are falling in behind it like in a vacuum, right? So you go and then things can't do but to fall. So our earth is actually eddying, and the other planets in our solar system, according to Tarshik Bay, they're actually eddying like in a spiral. So here goes the sun, and then here come all its little followers. Hey, wait for us. We're coming too. We're coming too. And so like it's actually eddying behind like that. But you could say that even as brilliant as the sun is, what actually inspired, what makes the sun have to get up and go to work, right? Because everybody got to be to work on time, right? But also our solar system and what is on time par excellence, and it had been so. But what actually chased it like that? The sun is that bright, but what makes the sun get up in the morning like that? It'd likely be something dark. I don't think it'd be something that bright. Hey, the boss of the sun, the bright guy. Do you want to come keep pace with us? Because we got to go right now for the next 10 trillion years, and we got to be on time for the next trillion years, like that, right? It's probably something dark. You know what that mean? It mean we got to go for the next 10 trillion years like that, or there's gonna be hell to pay. There's gonna be darkness to pay. But with John Frusciante, he was in like a little bit of a void, but he was making this. He was singing these songs, and if you appreciate the spirit that he's making these songs, like it kind of like it's like da-da-na, da-da-na, da-da-na. He's like, I'll connect you with your shadow, da-da-na, da-da-na, da-da-na. Um, it's actually it's so like macabre, almost macabre and creative and light. Can you imagine macabre and lighthearted and playful and spontaneous at once? That's John Frusciante in those videos. But it was like a little bit of a hiatus for him. It was a creative hiatus coming off of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and you could say that he's the kind of person that doesn't fit in with the group, even though the group is banking millions of dollars and touring the world. He don't just quite fit in like that. And I had been like that on a relative to scale. And so here I go at that time period, but the actually time is relative. So you could say that if I was truly inspired by him, we may be existing at the same because what we have, whatever would manifest as reality, that you can perceive, it actually exists in a latent state. But that latent state, the manifest state too, but the latent state is actually within and through and beyond what our notions of linear time. And so you could say that if he's ever once existing like that truly, and I'm ever actually reciprocal with that truly, thing because that was 10 years ago, right? But before that he was talking 15, 20 years ago now, but it's now 10 years, da 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 da. So the time actually doesn't, it's relative to scale. But you could say that it was like a similar void, and maybe all great, so according to him, all artists are connected on a web. But you could almost say that maybe all that dark space, that timeless space, that cryogenic sleep, or restfulness or wakefulness, cryogenic dormancy, hibernation, latency. It may be itself beyond time, and that's just a place that all of us artists go. All of us artists go there in John Frusciante living room like that in L.A. when he got a little bit of bank to play with, and he don't got to answer to nobody. And he's where the hell, we ain't seen him in a few months, man. What he been doing? He been writing songs like that and drifting off into the netherworld and coming back. But he would say some really deep things like that, like I don't see that. I don't see that death is really a big deal because everyone's gonna die. And then he would say stuff like, and that's the thing too. It started because everybody talking like this and that. But then at a certain at a certain point it just start to get real, and so it's going to start to separate the boys from the men at that point. You know, like what's going to stay with it and not, and so it's going to, he's going to start to have like a little bit I'm like, now I'm paraphrasing him, but he was like at that point you're gonna, it's gonna start to separate the boys from the men. And you could probably say that with anything that you're into, anything that you choose to do and or that you're inspired to do. If you stick with it long enough, it's gonna get real, and it's gonna get mean, and it's gonna get taxing, and it's gonna get dangerous. Even if you were like the world's greatest kitten expert, you do video now. It actually would pay dividends to watch them kitten videos. I imagine are not all about kittens, like why they'd be so viral. Because if you can imagine how much everyone is like a damn cat these days, it had always been. Cats are actually beautiful. You could learn a lot about cats, but the more you'd actually learn, if you were to really study politics, political science, the a lot of them books about like about human psychology and managing people, like even all the way up to like really poetic stuff, like poetic, ironic poetic stuff, and romantic stuff, like your greats of greats. The principles that are viable at that level are more and more like cats. Like an example of that is there's this book called O by Daisetsu Suzuki, and he was a brilliant scholar from Japan. And he would talk. He's some of what popularized Eastern thought and also Japanese culture in Zen, to be specific, to the West, because the a lot of ideas in the West were a little bit like landlocked, because the West, the whole world too, as a function of Western hegemony, it wasn't tolerant of a lot of other ideas and faiths until the 20th century. And a lot of that was because of, there's some person named Swami Vivekananda. He has a book called Yoga, the Four Forms of Yoga, Bhakti, Jnana, Kriya, and Bhakti, Jnana, Kriya, and Raja. Those words appear in a lot of texts, but it's not clear the distinctions. And he's an inheritor of that faith of Swami Vivekananda. I think National Youth Day in India is named after him, but he would get back and forth between the United States and visit places like Chicago, I think. And he made some of the inroads that popularized later would become like Eastern thought in America, it being acceptable. Where like now you can go into a bookstore and pick up a book about almost any topic, and things are above board like that, and it's okay. Um, that he did that, and then also you had just to shout out some great people that actually changed the world as ideas go. I wanted to do this one today about ideas. Another one would be you had the Theophist Society. So this were a society that they were like kind of like, you would call them woo woo people, but they weren't entirely woo woo. They weren't bogus like that, but they were avant garde, and they were pushing the envelope. And they would be in India, and they recognized. It was thanks for lost battery power. Trying to do some work. I got to lower my voice a little bit because of the vicinity. And I actually speak to a little bit what has changed the climate. Both it's actually, I'm gonna try to tie in some things together here, and it's what I want to start the video with. So I was saying that a lot of the tolerance for different ideas that would amount to tolerance for different faiths and tolerance for different lifestyles and different professions now, and different a changing of the guard of standards as the mind goes, and then what, because all things start with the mind and they go out from there. Some of the real pioneers of that would be, there was a man named Swami Vivekananda in India. He was an Indian boy. He grew up in India. I think his father was a if I'm not mistaken, his father was a lawyer, and his father was he was a somewhat of a modest but still substantial means, in relatively speaking, at those times in the late 1800s. But this Swami Vivekananda, he observed according to his own somewhat uh, brief, terse means like short-winded, autobiography at the beginning of his book, or no, I'm sorry, it was a biography at the beginning of his book, is that he grew up, he observed some monks. So like India, a lot of all human families have profound gifts and blessings as both an atomic family and a collective of families, even dispersed across an entire continent. And you can see some trends like in what would come from different areas. Like that I had some people from like certain parts of like Eastern Europe they can be very proficient around things that are technical. Like I like such as the guitar. The guitar is romantic, but you can't get all the way onto some of the romance of the instrument until you're proficient with it technically. And I had picked up, like, for example, like I would take like lessons. I actually I visited my alma mater recently of guitar, and I would take lessons with some of these real, no kidding, like guitarists that would like they would they would uh um they would like open for like football, professional football games. They would play for the troops, like when at some of the height of the wars overseas, like that, and cool stuff like that. And they were able to make a decent standard of living as a touring artist in the last 10, 5, 10, 15 years. But he would be teaching me. I'm not going to mention the teacher's name, but he'd be teaching me like how to do chords with your. And I'm not. This is what I'm going to do with my fingers. Is not affiliated with anything. This is as guitar playing goes. But he would be wanting me to make a chord like that, and he'd say, but I'd be making a chord like when I would try to make a chord like a certain to go from one chord to another. I go like this, and then I go like that. It actually wasn't succinct enough to like perform like that. And he would say, no, I need you to make your fingers like a stamp, so you go from one chord to the other like a stamp, like that, that, that. And just to do that, just about how would you actually do that? You wouldn't know how to do that. It's very difficult to get on to do that directly because you want to do it that way. You actually have to have a little bit of a method of practice before you have a method of playing. So I didn't know what the hell to do with that, and I didn't get past that sticking point for a while. But then when I got on with the classical teacher from Eastern Europe, from Slovenia, and when our first lessons, he would be teaching me. He had things in mind for our lessons. He didn't tell me all where he was going, but he was very gentle. Okay, so put your finger like this. Now do like that. Now, and he would first have me go like, okay, I want you to go on the guitar and go like this. Like, so he was teaching me finger independence and dexterity. That would make your fingers stronger independently, but then also two together. Because if they're stronger independently, they're also stronger together. And then you can make that stamp shape. You can actually practice making that stamp shape without playing anything, and you're just doing stamps like that. And then it make the playing almost like child's play. And I bet you, if you took, because I've actually bumped into near about rocket scientists like in the Southwest, like the home of the show Breaking Bad. I grew up in that area, and I grew up with a child that I grew up playing sports with not I can't say he's playing sports with. He would come to our hood, our neighborhood during the summertime, and be he was on my basketball team in the summertime. But he was a prominent member of that show. But that show is actually not. There's actually some significance that it would be located there because New Mexico, Albuquerque, it has some of the cultures and subcultures that show references, but it also has the very science. So that actual subculture of that Albuquerque, New Mexico, but New Mexico in general, is the perfect place for the show Breaking Bad because of the culture, the subculture of like enjoying but also suffering around substance, the humor, the beauty of the people, the language, but then also the science because out New Mexico is about real science. There's some real science venues in New Mexico that you would know of and not know about that would be disclosed and not disclosed to the general public that would be visible upon the earth and not in New Mexico. Not to be arbitrary about that, but it's really a home of science. But I was there recently and I'm in a guitar store recently with a real scientist, a accomplished scientist person that already he succeeded as a scientist and he raised a family to maturity. He has like successful adult children now, but he doesn't and he has all these cool ideas. Not to mock the person, but he has a lot of cool ideas about guitar, but he doesn't have the chops yet. Not that he can't have them, but he doesn't have the chops yet. But if you were to actually like approach a small child and teach them some of those mechanics that my teacher had told me, they will be playing that guitar as an actual rocket scientist, chemist cannot conceive how to do such a thing if they don't have an actual inroad into how you would go about doing something that technical, but also like because like when you're playing guitar, you're using your left hand usually if you're right-handed to fret the instrument. So to be that coordinated, how would you go about being that coordinated with your? How can very many people can you this simply? I don't know. Some people, this might seem like a lot. This might not seem like a lot. So this is my left hand now, right? I'm now here about to button my shirt with my left hand. Let's see. Well, I haven't actually been practicing buttoning my shirt a lot recently with my left hand, but just to prove a point. So let me see. I just one second. It's it's just the thing of it, right? It's just okay. So in that long as I'm talking right now, right? I just button my left shirt, my shirt with my left hand. Then I just unbutton it with my left hand. I'm gonna button it twice with my left hand. One second. Now I'm flexing a little bit, so it's slowing me down because I'm flexing. That's the first one. It's a little bit. It's just. It's a little bit awkward, this shirt, but just to prove a point about the dexterity with the left hand. Okay, so I just did that right pretty quickly, not rapidly, but pretty quickly, right? To unbutton and rebutton the shirt with the left hand, right? Now, part of the reason I can do that is because when I was a boy, like in the early 2000s, one of my friends, older brother, he would hit us with some game, and he would teach us some things about life. And he's saying if you want to be a hooper, you need to be using your left hand to damn near eat food with and tie your shoes with. And so I took him up on that when I was in college. I was considering like some crucial lifestyles and professions. And so I figured it behooved me to start training, to start using take him up on that. And the very first thing I did was button my shirt with my left hand. And that was like, whoa, how would I thought I was like being crazy, like doing something like button my shirt with my left hand, like that was about like 12, that was a while back. But then I didn't stop doing that. And I still had, that was about the time I got in hard times in school. And then I came home and I just saw my dad's instrument sit around, the same instrument I was getting serviced recently. And I thought, damn it, if I could play that instrument spoke to me when I was on hard times. I was like, if I could play that instrument, man, nobody could pretty much take away a livelihood from me or like be an artist from me, because I wouldn't need nobody for shit if I could play an instrument good enough. And so that started me with like wanting to play an instrument. And I've never left the aspiration to do that, but I also never stopped training my left hand. Then I got around this guitar teacher like in the last couple of years, and he was liking how long my fingers were and teaching me some of those exercises about finger independence. But also, what dovetail with that is that I have been actually training my left hand, because like I'll be having jobs all the way back then, like way back around 12 and later, as like a pizza, like working in a pizza shop. But when we're getting slammed like that, and even they got the head honcho in charge like that, the regional person come check us out while we're getting slammed like that. I'll be saucing pizzas with my left hand and dicing them with my left hand, and putting the ingredients out with my left hand, just because I wanted to be good to go. Like when there'd be like if you can do something under pressure, then you can trust it. So I would then it played into the guitar. But that would be difficult for a person to do, like what I'm doing right now with the left hand. It'd be difficult to use your left hand like that if you're not practicing your left hand a lot. But also, it'd be difficult to play, even doing this. It would be difficult to play to fret a guitar well if you didn't have that finger independence. But that's some of the chops around people like of Eastern Europe. They can be very proficient with technical things. And then my father tells me that they always, the country that my father comes from has a relationship with Prussia, Germany, then Prussia, now Germany. There's a history of both fighting and commerce and loving that comes from Germany to our area, and a little bit of Dutch too. And so but they still always appreciated how well they were with like engineering, even while having conflict. And not you can't take away what's good about people. And but in India, they sometimes they can be just very keen and be very insightful and brilliant. So I would imagine that even for someone from India, a young person, it would be impressive to see somebody who was like an actual saint, holy person, and really mean that and be congruent with that. So I think that that left an impression. You could say that what we have now for freedom in the West, even in America, what we have that's viable of freedom in the West, it's actually not independent of a function of what was started with Swami Vivekananda himself of India, who National Youth Day is named after, and him too being inspired by the actual awesome August impression of witnessing a holy person. What thou do, according to Arthur Avalon, is that when you lay eyes upon a person who's actually holy and is congruent like that, it's a blessing to you, and it changes you because you're changed by anything that you see, do, feel, and think. And so it changed him and inspired him to become a holy person. And then he wrote that book Yoga, the Four Forms of Yoga, which is brilliant. But then he would be making inroads to the United States in the early 2000s, and I mean the early 20th century, and he started to begin some of the major. He's the one who's to just to give you to calibrate my statements. The religion, the faith of Hinduism is now recognized as a world religion and on the world stage as a valid full-fledged certified world religion because of Swami Vivekananda. He was the first one to initiate and engage and win the status and the honor and the respect and the tolerance and the acceptance and the celebration of Hinduism on the world stage as a world religion. Swami Vivekananda did that, and it's interesting also that in the West, to that point too, and as a function of that, probably too, the some a lot of the freedoms that we have in the United States, it's not different than the civil rights movement. Some people think that the civil rights movement was a psyop. It can be reasoned or argued by certain some people that would speak along those lines. Not to quote someone or misquote someone, but some people that know the like for example. Martin Luther King, his real name was Michael. It's appreciated that Martin Luther King's real name was actually Michael. I don't. Some people may or may not know that. That might be new to someone or not. And Michael was he was from the church itself. People know that, but he also was not far away from some of the circles that would be very influential then. That would have actually been part of the problem as much as the solution. Some of the things, a lot of it, because like there's this comic thing called The Watchmen, and it says who watches the Watchmen. So it's interesting, like if you just like a lot of things are more so you really can't be simple minded in life, right? Imagine so I think like on the campus of the University of Mississippi in the in some if you remember some of the very first students to be brave enough to attend all white schools in the South, right? Those first students that did that, it's interesting that sometimes you would have to send out the next because when a person conscripts themselves, when they choose to be conscripted either as an enlisted person or an officer, they swear to uphold the Constitution against resistance, foreign and domestic. And I think that I don't know if the National Guard swears a different allegiance, but I think that the National Guard itself, it's to that point is that the National Guard is intended to stand up to either local or federal authority where appropriate, when necessary. And that's actually part of what health is because if you think about it, you can't be healthy without challenging yourself, right? You can't be robust. You can't have an immune system. Your immune system keeps you clean. It keeps your body in check. Cleaning is some mean stuff. They say cleanliness is next to godliness, but also cleanliness is some mean stuff when it's done right. So your immune system, it checks other things, and if it came to a point where your immune system couldn't discriminate, and usually you would think that the word discrimination is bad, but your immune system actually has to discriminate what's friend and foe, what's self and other, and there's probably a buoyancy and a balance because you need a little bit of detriment, virus, taxing, you need actually a little bit of damage to have growth, to have healing. You need damage to have healing. You need healing to have growth. So you actually need some detriment. You need something of virus. You need something of bacteria, and it's all a give and take buoyancy that's a viable balance. It's not a perfect balance. It's not even an established balance. It's a viable balance for intensive purposes, as long as it's fun, as long as it's rock and roll, baby. But so you need a little bit of like be the ability to stand up to yourself, to stand up against yourself as to function, be clean. But the United States Constitution, it operates like that, and that too is not entirely from its founders as they're presented, because according to Tashriq Bey, you had a lot of influence of the indigenous people, the Moorish people of Africa. It had a lot to do with the learning and seasoning that afforded the knowledge to transit to the West and be viable here, but then also the local people here would have helped with that, such as the Anasazi and the known as the Iroquois had bearing onto the Constitution, like especially with the concept of checks and balances. And I think the National Guard itself is like a mode and an expression of checks and balances. That might be a uniquely American thing, not American as in the European settlers only, but American as in the actual traditions of the people upon the Americas would have the insight of checks and balances that may give you some of the functionality of the National Guard. Some of our freedoms now, but also getting past the knee-jerk reactions of the old guard and the arbitrariness of it and the redundancy of it and the failures and pitfalls and suffering of the old ways of looking at people that is doing things. It actually took some of that the check of the National Guard, because even though there would have been there were these children of color that were being integrated to the white schools were given the order from on high to do so. The schools weren't allow them to do that, but the National Guard was going to allow them to do it. Now, the National Guard, they may be just as egregious then as the actual people they're standing up to, but they swore an oath. And one thing that's actually people don't give enough credit sometimes to to white society. When I say white, I just mean the status quo of the Western hegemony, like America, of any hue or background ethnicity that is white society. They stay on code, on principle, and so if you're with us, you're with us, but also us is more important than you or even any combination of us. That is, the U.S. is more important. The U.S. Constitution is more important than any particular interest in the U.S. or organization in the U.S. itself. Even these other egregious people that aren't doing what the governor said they're supposed to do, integrate these children. So the very National Guard, they may be they may be racist or not. They may be when you side with people and you take up their side and they're egregious or not, that's called apologizing. That's a finer distinction, nuance of the word apologizing. So somebody that sides with a racist, they're a racist apologist. So some of those National Guards, like in the time of integration, they may yet have been actual segregation apologists and enthusiasts, but not that's not bigger than their job and their because they got a family, right? They may think like these other people, but these other people are more important to them than their family, and the way that they pay for their family, but also that the way that they form their identity is in paying deference and homage and serving upon the threat and penalty of life and death, or the prospect of life and death, the U.S. Constitution, which is to carry out the orders that they're given, even against their other countrymen. So it's actually kind of beautiful to see that these people, they're having to stand up to racism whether they like it or not, against the other people who are racist, whether they like them standing up to them or not, because that's what the word had been, baby. But that word like that and some of the inroads that gave the actual political pressure, and then even the person giving the order, some of those very governors that would have been ordering the desegregating of the school, they might not have they too may have been racist apologists, but the word came from on higher than that. That is that's actually where the trend was going. That's where the times were going. So actually, a lot of that's where the influence was going. So influence is greater than any influencer, and politicians are still influencers then and now. So but a lot of the inspiration to do that, and the cohesion to do that, and the force and momentum and movement to do that, that was your man Martin Luther King. But it was said that, but similar, some of the people, the circles that he would have been around, that would have been actually, because it's not always clear like where people come from. Like you had the great Kevin Samuels, like during the time of the pandemic, that I think that Kevin Samuels, he got his inroad ostensibly. I think there was a contention between Will and Jada Smith, I believe, right around the time of the time of the pandemic. There was before Will Smith had his episode on at the Oscars, whether that was staged or not. Um, Before that, there was a breach of fidelity between him and his wife, ostensibly with an influential artist who was friends with their son, who was also an influential artist, and that was actually trending at that time of the pandemic. And then there were a couple videos by Kevin Samuels where he weighed in on that. Here goes this dude in a suit like that, well spoken, well learned, very learned, savvy, hip person. If you go back in his catalog, he had been online before that, and he had very brilliant, beautiful, valuable signal of content Signals like so you have noise and then you have signal that's like things that actually change you actionable. Kevin Samuels had some of that. Like he had one video called well, he had some different videos from prior to the pandemic, leading up to it. But one of his real virality and he gained traction by weighing in on Will Smith and Jada Pinkett. But otherwise, he kind of came out of nowhere. So where do someone come out of nowhere, but they're that clean and polished? And he would say a lot of his videos like shout out to the da 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 and the da da da, and he would kind of make it sound like he's like this is an acronym of his, like, and it's part of his forum. But yeah, he just actually just said right out his mouth, shout out to the da 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 and the da da da. Whether he's using that as a clever acronym or not, he just said that out of his mouth. Shout out to the da 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 and the da da da, and he was yet presented like he just came up that quick. But so because you gotta watch them flowers that just they blossom a little bit too quick. So you walk out your door and there you got a rose like that, or a tulip. Now tulips do blossom fast, but you didn't. And where I live at, sometimes you would have they don't show their face normally, but then for 1 week in spring, you got a tulip like that. But there was some background that you could have a tulip at all. But then so you got these leaders that are that brilliant and beautiful as tulips, but they come up from nowhere. Some of that ostensibly, this person Michael would have been around the same actual venues and interests as what Kevin Samuel said out of his mouth. It's appreciated, and then he was sanctioned and authorized to be like that. But then you could say part of his mission was it may have been like a kamikaze mission to even take that up to be public and associate with those type of changes. But then also he gained so much traction with it that he became a force of his own, and he may have went contrary to the mission. That still may have been part of the mission or not. So you really don't know where the actual real impetus, the driving force, impelling and compelling something to happen started with, and had it been light or dark. Had the universe come from light or darkness, fundamentally, you could say the darkness leads to the light and the light leads to the darkness. Had it actually started with light or darkness? Had these great leaders, had they not also started with some of the same actual venues that because what make you can break you, what break you can make you, what hate you can love you, what love you can hate you. Some of these same very interests that they were under the under. Not only was Michael under the surveillance of these clandestine organizations, but he may have actually started there and been prompted there. So never was he not under the surveillance, even when he was being recruited, even when he was being trained, even when he was being successful, even when he was winning, even when he was a force to be reckoned with, even when he was his own thing, even when he was terrified, even when his thing is going on now, because these devices are still mitigated and conceived, and therefore you don't know how many back doors and windows exist on these devices that we're just handed. You're handed to, oh, here's all the options, here's all the functionality of your device. But do you really know all the functionality of your device and all the things it can do and not do with your knowledge and consent and not? So it's actually the very same things that we're online. Hey man, the man is the man, man. The man is horrible. Yeah, but the man also gave you that device and never had that device not function the way the man wanted it to. So the man is actually letting you talk your right, have your righteous cake and eat it too. Maybe not eat it too, but you at least get to have your righteous cake for a time. But for whether you say Martin or Michael, for what he did, it's appreciated that he was inspired and he was able to conceive of, even though he was from the Christian faith, I don't think that the Christian faith was as versed in nonviolence as Michael was. And that by the example of Mahatma Gandhi of India, but also him coming from a Christian background, being in the US and being in a Christian background from the US, one or a couple of generations prior to that, several decades prior to that, it wouldn't have been viable for even him, as brilliant as he was, to entertain or actually be aware of and be then soon be possessed of, enlightened toward the thoughts and ideas of India, because anything that wasn't by the book, what was blasphemy, was idolatry, and it wasn't tolerated. I was actually reading that book by Swami Vivekananda on yoga in the year 22 at a base. Like I was being trained as a CDO. I had just won my CDO. I was functioning as a CDO, and people at the base were like, "Are you sure you know what you're doing? Reading a book about yoga? Yeah, yeah. But do you really? How do you? Are you? They're asking me if I'm either competent or if it's really appropriate for me, an adult, able to vote, to read, write, and vote, make decisions for myself, get myself a cool job as a CDL, get myself any manner of of fortunate or misfortunate outcome based on my conduct as an adult to associate and disassociate as I choose. You're having misgivings about my competence to read a book that I procured with money that I earned in the year 22. That can show you how thick and strong some of the approbation and restriction around literature would have been in the time of Michael. And then before that, and not to be egregious by calling him out of his name, as people would know him as Dr. Martin Luther King, but I have a pretty congruent source that, as in Grand Sheik Tashreeq Bey, that said that his name is in fact Michael prior to his assignment. Um, and so, um, 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 I'm not saying who or what dispatched him, and that wasn't his own initiative and impetus to dispatch himself, but it's appreciated that he was his life had amounted to a mission, and at one point he was known as Michael, according to Tashreeq Bey. But even at his time and before that, it wouldn't have been conceivable to have access or be aware of even someone like Gandhi. But even to Gandhi, I think he was influenced by the Jaina people of India because according to Osho, the Jaina people, they practice not in India, when they practice something, they don't play about it. Like they really go all the way there. Like you didn't think someone could go there. Like you're used to like people like that are users, right? You're used to people that they go and they buy some sketchy stuff like that as users. In India, they just use a damn cobra like that, right? They ran out. They have such a tolerance to the actual normal like inoculations of like substance that it take a corporal venom now for them to get on like that, and that too while they're fasting and they're not resting for days on end. I'm like a little bit improvising that, but they really go all the way there seriously, simply, earnestly in India when they're about that. But such too was the Jaina people when they practice nonviolence. They'll practice nonviolence so much as to not step on grass or Osho said like if a bed were to have bed bugs in it, they would actually sleep, they would ask somebody to sleep in the bed with bed bugs so the bed bugs may not be deprived of nutrition because none should go without feasting and eating, not even bed bugs, if you really wanted to be that nonviolent about it. That's what it takes to be real about something. As the Jaina people would hand off the example to Mahatma Gandhi, I extrapolate then because all things come from somewhere. He would have had to get that from somewhere. I know there's a lot of great faiths of India, and they, according to Arthur Avalon, any earnest student of knowledge of wisdom, that wisdom is actually a better word than both religion and philosophy because they're both actually wisdom. But any student of wisdom and worship, wisdom and worship together, which is a religion par excellence when it's real, you will likely land in India. Or if you didn't, a lot of ideas would have come from India. And some people reason whether the figure that's known as and presented as Jesus Christ in the holy books, he is and had been a real person, is reason that he would have been influenced by India because some of his very approach and he's a lot like what's called a sadhaka. Sadhana is an earnest quest to undergo some form of initiative that amounts to self-culture and improvement and later enlightenment, and it's distinguished and and indicated and attended by different siddhis that are blessings, like such as to like even like to talk in front of this camera like that, like about different subjects, but also denotatively and to make references and somewhat fluently. That's a form of siddhi in itself. That would amount. That's a function of different arduous scholarship, but and then also living lessons based on employing that scholarship to different degrees as is conceivable, and all that is sadhana. But a real sadhana, is a holy person. But holy doesn't have to mean only what you would call good or righteous. It just means reverential in worship and to really press and find out what it means to exist and how to exist as one may choose to do so, and to both suffer and enjoy, which is both suffering to that outcome. A great outcome is the deepest thing a person can do. But the person Jesus Christ, as he's presented to us, and some of his approaches to things like turn the other cheek like that, stuff like that, is very reminiscent of the real pedigree of sadhakas and holy men in India, going way back even before the timeline of what's presented as Jesus in the Bible. But you could say that a lot of our what we have of what's called freedom in the West, the reality of that, was actually real about that. A lot of it came from the contributions of Michael during the time of the civil rights movement, and that too from being influenced by Gandhi, and that too from being influenced by holy people and traditions in India, likely the Jaina people. I'm extrapolating based on comments of Osho that's available on Audible on his books series on Osho, and also on YouTube. There's content by Osho, and he references and enunciates some of the positions of the and the practices of the Jaina people, which coalesce with the statements and the lifestyle of Mahatma Gandhi at his best. And then Swami Vivekananda would have been making inroads to make. He won for Hinduism respect on the world stage. Then you had the Theosophist Society that was influent. I think they were affluent people from Europe who were seeking to learn about the East. Like learning about the East and having appreciation for the East did not start with Swami Vivekananda, because you had people interested in India back then, but there weren't a lot of resources for it, and you have to go all the way to India. But then Arthur Avalon was another person like that, where Arthur Avalon, he was a Englishman, an actual knight in England, and a judge, and he was on the High Court of India. But he was an excellent scholar. But then on top of that, he was a student of real hermits, sages, gurus, ascetics, and holy men, sages. A word for all that would be Muni, is a person that thinks original thoughts for themselves. And he enunciated a lot of tantra. There's actually not one thing called tantra. I think a lot of times when you hear the word tantra, you think of like you think of lovemaking and like revelry and like different like parties that involve like lovemaking, and that would be one part. But that's not just simply tantra. I think tantra just means book. If I'm not mistaken, tantra refers to a book, and there were many tantras in India, and they weren't all in agreement. They would be contrasting. There, like another word, a tantra, it might be very similar or interchangeable with school and or book would be a tantra, but there's different tantras, and there's also different points and means and approaches to worship in tantra. But some of it does have to do with like lovemaking, but that too falls under the umbrella, according to Arthur. I'm not actually from India, and I don't mean to be egregious or appropriating, but I've looked a lot into his works, so I'm just referencing statements that occur in the works of Arthur Avalon, but also drawing connections to other to my experience as an American citizen, and to other books that coalesce and corroborate some of these insights as they occur to me. But there you have something called the five M's, the five mudras, and they're like the five articles of worship: holy, holy, and sacred, and very pivotal things that exist. And they would be wine, fish, corn, meat, and lovemaking are all of life come from those, and they're very significant. Like India, fish, for example, fish actually, I would, because as a human being, you don't actually have mental health. You have health, and your mind is part of your health. But also, nothing is actually strictly objective and fit. There's no experience of mind without matter, nor matter without mind, because if you had not a mind, how could you experience anything of matter? Yet, if you did not engage with matter, how could you experience anything of a mind, as you know yourself in your mind? So really to stay or fixate upon either mind or matter, you get off into the weeds like that. If you fix on mind as reality unto itself, you can be arbitrary like that, and that is actually woo woo. If you're appreciating the mind as having nothing of corresponding to corporeal physical reality, objective substance, that can be perceived by science, or what he talks about matter even going finer than what can be appreciated by science, or broader than that, but still to appreciate mind as being nothing of having a bearing of corporal reality is bogus, because even something that can be appreciated as in terms of organic chemistry, like plant substance, animal substance, mineral substance, and some metals, it can affect the mind profoundly. So it would be bogus to say that the mind does not correspond to and is therefore a function, a property, or state of matter. But then such is the true also that if we were to say that that mind is bound by our understanding of matter, or not different, or at least transcendent of our understanding of matter, that could be arbitrary. But so things don't stop it. So what affects you, it affects your entire body, your entire existence actually. Anything, like for example, if you do an exercise, right, that exercise, it's not just impacting your, like you do an exercise with your leg or your foot, it's not just impacting your foot or your leg and to stop there as you know it. That may be where you can locally feel it there without more subtlety, but it's actually impacting all of your existence and existence and potentially prior, present, and future ancillary existences that you're aware of and not aware of, anything you do at any time. Because if you mess with your foot the right or wrong way, you may have an experience down the line that amounts to people being born or not being born based on what you did with your foot. So your foot is still connecting with all that will be you or not get to be you. It's like that. So fish is very potent like that, and it may be make you more creative on all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, all levels. Fishes, and that's how strong the creature of a fish is. Because according to a rabbi I met, fish, they cannot afford to blink their eyes, such as they have no eyelids, and they have sometimes you don't appreciate how much of faith animals really have. Like we think of ourselves as being so enlightened because we can reason things and we have our like our opposable thumbs and we can engineer and fashion things and conceive things with our mind. But animals sometimes they have a deeper form of faith than like if say a person were fasting all the time, right, and they would do prayer, or they would be completely prostrate and subject to their understanding of a higher power, in and out of cold season, hot season, away from food at all times of day and night. That would be almost like holy, right? But that's what a lot of animals are always doing. And according to Arthur Avalon, it's not profound, but it is actually what they are. And so fish are like that, is that fish are some of the strongest beings that you can conceive of. If you look at how dangerous it is, how could be swimming be so dangerous? But it's actually terrifying and dangerous to be a fish, because every fish got a bigger fish is out to get them. Because I seen them actually wrangle big old sharks right out the dam. You actually got cages for sharks, and sometimes in other parts of the world, these different poachers, they'll actually there's certain sophisticated medicine, and you would call that entheogens, like things that can affect your mind or just your body. I, that would be profound. That you can rot and wrangle with certain animal substance that's protected for that very reason, because it's so lucrative that these animals will be endangered, and they'll also be abused egregiously if there aren't protections. But such are these sharks. So there's actually some sharks in Asia where parts of their body are a delicacy, and they're like a kind of like not caviar. They are not caviar in itself, but they're about as rare and valuable as caviar, if not more. But they'll fish these sharks, mind you, and then what they do to procure the valuable part of their body, they'll do it while the shark is still living, and it's excruciating. There's very few things you can think of as more painful than being bitten by a shark while yet in salt water. But what in a shark that can give you a person that much pain, what they can do to these sharks, an actual poacher, is actually unspeakable and inhumane, even towards a fellow creature in a shark, and potentially more painful than actually getting bitten by a shark in salt water. What can happen to these sharks? And they're not actually as accommodating enough as to put the poor creature out of its misery, so to speak, before doing such a thing. So there's a level to everything, and there's a higher level of fear and terror even for a shark like that. But so from that standpoint, fish are just very strong. So just like a shark doesn't stop moving, it can be reasoned whether fish even sleep at all since their eyes don't close. But such too is their body and their flesh it's different than meat according to a rabbi. But it also is very health is it can be overdone, but it gives a person a lot of vigor and vitality, probably on all levels, including in terms of procreative potence. So those are two of the five M's. Then you have corn. A lot of like whatever you would have of meat, like say livestock, they're being fed corn a lot, like a lot of corn. But corn is it's a very, I don't know if you've ever ran, like some things occur to you when you're running that can't occur to you when you're not in that state of mind. It's a different state of mind. Like sometimes you hear about these crazy runners or runners high, and you see, man, why is that dude running out there at this hour right now? Doesn't he know there's actually sometimes like there? So I live at the home of the Timberwolves, like the basketball team, the Timberwolves, and there damn well are Timberwolves out there at night, because I've done deliveries and I've seen them out there when I'm having deliveries at night. And I've also had something that was big enough to be a timber wolf or a wolf at least, or a stray dog at least, while I'm doing deliveries in the wee hours of the night. And those dogs didn't make me be doing deliveries like that, but they are yet out there in the damn city limits like that. If you want to be bold enough to be on foot at night in the city limits, you got them out there. But um, they lost a train of thought. Um, but so running though, but running is like it. I think one is that pounding like that because your brain is actually bouncing around that whole time you're running. That in itself is like a little bit of it's not like so you have CTE like a trauma to the brain, but you can also it's like when you're doing that much running, it's not trauma and it's not bad. Just like so trauma to the head, you would think of that as bad, and it can be bad easily. It can easily be bad and be overdone, but sometimes like medicine can actually be a form of detriment. So like that actual bouncing of your brain, it might actually be a little bit healthy when it's running, and but also it can make you crazy like that. Both what it's doing to your body, the chemistry of your body, and making you feel the vigor and that had you could actually have fun and feel good while running, but then also it's bouncing your brain like that, and also you're getting in the habit of it. So you become enough of it, and you start to actually appear crazy because you kind of are crazy to do that. But but for some reason, when you're running like that, you think of the sun differently, and you think of corn differently. I did when I was a runner. I would just have these thoughts about that. I'll go running. When I first fell in love with running as a college student, like I was a strong runner in school. I would play sports, and then like at gym, like they'll have us run one day, and I'm like I'm running laps around everyone. Like it's kind of like I'm trying to look like I'm showing off, but I was actually just running at a natural like cadence for how fit I was. But then I got back into doing that at college. And if you're really something, it's very simple to fall back into that mode if the circumstances are right. So right now I'm actually falling back into the mode of running a lot and exercising a lot. Because the some of the hardship that I've sustained has put me on my feet more. And then also getting back into like gyms, but actually knowing more about fitness because of what's proliferated on YouTube and my prior experiences around fitness is that I'm coming back into a season like that. So if something's really you can actually revert back into positive seasons of productive seasons in your life if the circumstances are favorable and you're making prudent decisions with discipline. But I would just think I'll be running around these lakes like back in the day in the middle of the night where I wasn't knowing about the wolves back then. Instinctually, I knew I probably shouldn't be out here that late, but I wasn't thinking about that there could actually be wolves around these damn lakes in the middle of the night. But I'll be running in the like 2 in the morning around a damn lake like that. I'll be doing that, and I'll just start thinking about the sun and corn like that. But then meat in India, they look at meat as a little bit more dicey. Like it's actually more they they according to my friend who visited India, they would appreciate that when you are consuming meat, you're rolling the dice because you're actually stripping that animal of its life for enjoyment, and it is very it's delicious it's delicious almost like doing drugs back in the day before we had access to food as much if you were hungry enough. But then uh so you got meat and then I think wine. No, I'm sorry. I think it's wine. So it's I think meat and fish are interchangeable. Corn, wine, and lovemaking, and then wine according to that is part it would be part of worship, and it would be it's so wine brings out your inherent disposition. It's like if you're an agreeable person, then wine will more so make you agreeable. If you're actually a disagreeable and contrary person, unless you've been I think wine it also brings around out who you've seen around wine. So if you grew up with people who were violent alcoholics, the alcohol it might make you default to being a violent alcoholic because that's part of you if you saw that. But then if you actually grew up around agreeable people, or that was like distinctly your disposition, even though you didn't see that, then it'll bring out more of what you already are, according to Arthur Avalon. It brings out, but in those settings, in those ceremonies of like of tantra, if a person were to overdo wine, that's as bad. That's still actually bad. That's very bad, and that's one of the worst things you can do, even in a setting of revelry and lovemaking. Is that to over? It's like a party foul, but a very bad party foul. It's just like a party foul inside of us, something that's sacred. On top of that, and then he would say something that like one thing that's significant is like there's a I said on the channel that you have vulgar, profane, indecent, lewd, um, uh, and there's a few other cursing, cussing, things like that. Those are nuanced words, but they can overlap and mean the same or different things. So like, if you're cussing, that's when you're using like four-letter words. When you're cussing, you're using words that are profane, but they may still be appropriate even though they're profane, right? So like, you could say that the F word, right? The F word is profane under almost any, like, it's the very, if you look up the F word by Osho on YouTube, he has a piece that he did where he was talking about how sophisticated the F word is. Like, whatever, so he made that video in like the 70s, right? I bet you if you had an AI algorithm that could conceive and calculate every word that was being uttered at all moments in time in almost all regions, but especially the West, from the time he made that video to presently, I bet you the main word that's being uttered anywhere, anyhow, anytime, any day of the year, except maybe Christmas, would be the F word. Maybe even to the F word if people have enough fun. People are using the F word constantly, but the F word can almost be in, so like we kind of gloss over the parts of speech. Like, we watch the parts of speech when we're young, but the parts of speech are still significant, and so are etymology. But that very F word, it can function as almost any parts of speech. So you can say the F word as a noun. I don't give a F. You can use the F word as a verb. Man, F that. You can use the S word as a verb to adverb to describe a verb. Did you see the way that dude effing did that? There's an adverb right there. Or you can use it as the adjective. Man, that was an effing dope jacket. You just use it as an adjective. Or you can use it as almost any of the parts of speech. You can use the F word is commonly used as that. So the F word is almost interchangeable with any form of speech, and also any form of, you can communicate anything with the F word. So like, if a lot of people are like, I remember I heard this would have to be a badass to say that, but I was like coming into like my parents' apartment building, and this neighbor, like, he's let me in a lot of times when I lock my key out, but he was having a hard time getting his key in while he's also letting in like a person to fix like an appliance here, and he was like, he's trying to get the key in. He was like, effing. So he's like, there go, effing. So I don't know what part of speech that would be like. So maybe he's saying please. So he's saying please work for me. But he's saying effing, or he's saying like damn it, effing. So you can actually say multiple parts of speech and communicate many ideas at the same time with the F bomb. But even where you should, so where you should use the F bomb in a school, in a job, in with friends, with family, anytime you'd use the F word, it's actually a little bit profane because it's not entirely appropriate, because what you're referring to, what the F word actually means is copulating. The F word means to copulate. That's what the F word means. So when you use that word under almost any circumstance, it's actually exactly profane. And even when it is appropriate, it's a feign for being seemingly inappropriate. So like, when you're lovemaking, copulating, you're doing things that under other circumstances would be entirely inappropriate and could get you strung up somewhere, or could hurt someone really bad. What you're doing when you're copulating, but that word that refers to that, but then the only thing that would be inappropriate, so cop effing could be the most inappropriate thing, right? But the only thing that would be more inappropriate than that, or as inappropriate, is that under the wrong circumstances would be to be a prude about effing. So like, if you were like shy or abashed, or you weren't vigorous about that, that would be weak. But still, so I'm just saying that the F word, it's actually vulgar. It's both. So vulgar would be like, so ketchup and mustard are great on hot dogs. But if you put ketchup and mustard together with a peanut butter sandwich, peanut butter and jelly, it's not wrong, but it's vulgar because it would be nasty together, because it doesn't harmonize like that. That's vulgar. So vulgar can be profane or indecent or in cussing, but what it actually means specific. So those would be like the latent. Those would be the potential of it. But the expression of vulgarity, whether it is that or not, is that it's just not. It doesn't. It's not in agreement with the time and setting in the audience and venue. Is vulgar like that. But it can also be appropriate for being vulgar, like in terms of comedy, or like relating to people. But that's some of the savviness of a comedian, or just a person that's cool. But then you have profane. Profane is like when you take something that's sacred and you make it common. That's profane. So in these like what's referred to as tantra, is that when they're doing things love making revelries and stuff like that, not not only is it exceptional that they're making those gestures, because it's more so what you're saying, because you're always communicating, and there's no more deeper way you can communicate than with your body, whether dancing or love making or fighting. That's the deepest you can communicate, is nonverbal with your body, and or combination of verbal and nonverbal, but with your body, because your body is your existence. So when you're making gestures, you're making statements with your body, with your existence. That's profound, beautiful in a context. But then also in some of these lovemaking venues, they would be from different stratas of class. And India is very particular about class. The whole earth is, but particularly India, they have very strong approbations, restrictions, and accommodations based on class. But two, back then they would relax some of that for worship, because the only thing that's deeper than class is worship. And so in worship, it would actually be appropriate to release or to be playful around the designation of class, but that too inside of a sacred something that's private, at least like an appropriate venue. But then when that worship is over, the cast is actually is it's re-engaged and it's assumed again, and the activities of that circle are not blasted or there that is profaned by being flippant or being public about it where it would be appropriate. So I just want to point out that that exists in the works of Arthur Avalon. So Tantra is not about Tantra, but also it's broader than what's known as Tantra. And it's actually a more general term when you say Tantra like that. But Arthur Avalon, the only reason I'm going off into that is that because Arthur Avalon actually made some of that available to the West. So in the West, you also have something like Kundalini. So your whole body is it's full ceaseless. Like I have a family member who has a compromised organ system, and he has to otherwise have the function of that organ performed by a machine, and supplies that in the form of like these large quantities of certain substances. And if you appreciate how much it takes to service those machines, and how much those machines go through, and how much he goes through being next to those machines, it's actually incredible what your body accomplishes seamlessly, silently, unawares to you normally at any given moment. That's just one organ system, but your whole body is doing that. It would take machines and factories and years of labor and toil just to do what the human body does to simply maintain homeostasis, which is balance. That's not including all your creative potential and what can be realized based on your creativity. That also takes that homeostasis to give you the standpoint to do creative things. But uh, but your body is always in ceaseless motion as its existence is. This a lot of people would attempt to create a machine of ceaseless motion. They've attempted to do such a thing. Were you to do that, you likely would have had to create another universe, because in order for this universe to exist, right? Like sometimes you think about how broad life is, right? You're like, damn, where I live at, it's so big. There's so much concrete. It took so much work just to make this municipal area, right? But that's one of hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands in your only in your country. And then you have the whole Earth. Then you have whatever exists on the other planets, and the nebular galaxy, and the subnebular galaxy, and the in star cluster A, which is our the closest star cluster. Then you have the galaxies. Then you have the Milky Way. Then you have the other galaxies. Then you have, it you go on like that, right? But it actually takes all of that for any of that to exist, because you actually need, it takes that much of, that's how complicated and intricate things get, just to be very simple. Just for me to be running my mouth on this camera, so many things have to exist in my local area, have to be in my background of my own doing, in other areas around the world that I know about, that I don't know about. And so, according to Arthur Avalon, at all moments, we're receiving influences from all quarters of the universe of existence, maybe even heretofore and before now and after now and during now, as we're not aware. And that it takes all that just to get up and run your mouth somewhere. But for you to have, therefore, a aspect of this universe, a ceaseless motion machine, you would need to re-engineer the very universe to be viable. Because if you had a local ceaseless motion machine, even if it was viable, it's viable that too while existing in this universe somehow. So this universe would need to keep on existing for it to still be viable. So you need yet an entire universe to have a ceaseless motion machine. But that's what we are. But your body is a micro scale of that, and your body's in ceaseless motion. However, for something to be mobile, it needs something to support it and to stabilize it, and that's what's called, I think, Kendra, and that exists in your sacrum, the base, your most fundamental top Padma, known as chakra. The actual word for chakra is Padma, I think, in that tradition. But if you understand the chakras as a person in the West, and you're actually when you just for you to utter the word chakra, you're actually appropriating another culture and a school of thought, and thereby you're arbitrary because you're limited. You're not actually congruent in that and constituted as that. So you have to be appropriating, that is misinterpreting on some level, misunderstanding on some level, even for you to enunciate chakra. But what's called chakras are different centers of consciousness or realities of consciousness that correspond with different ranges of your body, and they're presented as seven. But sometimes according to Arthur Avalon, you have the seven main chakras that are known to mainstream, but then you have at least three or four others that are known to private circles in India. And there used to be restrictions about what could be promulgated to the public and not, because you had a guru class, a guru profession, schools of gurus, families of gurus, and also proprietary insider trade secret knowledge that was conceived of by gurus and handed down. And were you to divulge that publicly, untimely, needlessly, that could actually amount to blunders and shortcomings for both people that would intend to and not intend to misuse it. But you have at least three or four other primary padmas that are known, and focusing or even knowing of them can actually be attended by dangers. Focusing on any one of the padmas, according to Arthur Avalon, it actually is attended by dangers. And like for example, the navel, the stomach region, according to Arthur Avalon, where someone to focus. Now you do have to focus. I'm being arbitrary now, and I don't mean to be. I could be very arbitrary with this, but to sing well, you have to be actually an example of the padmas, the chakras padmas, would be singing, because when you, just like pain, right? Heaven forbid, you're not normally aware of your foot, right? But if you were to step on something, now your mind is exactly in your foot as it is not normally in your foot. So your mind can actually be in your foot, like if you were to place your mind there. Where does the mind really exist? Is it in the brain? Is it in the heart? Is it in the throat? Is it in the gut? Is it in the blood? Where is it? It's where you would both choose to have it and have it chosen for you together. Because kind of like some things, they can't actually be done, they can only be managed. You can't actually do your mind, you actually can't have a mind. You can experience a mind, enjoy a mind, manage your mind, but you can't have a mind or arbitrarily decide your mind or steer your mind. And that might be why it's so hard to be a singer, because to be a singer, you have to be subjective enough and artistic enough to use and also visceral enough, athletic enough to experience your mind in your body differently than you do under normal circumstances, to be compelling, and also to garner some of the sophistication and the subtlety of steering, of engaging your voice convincingly, to communicate artistically. But it's actually wavering and varying, so you may not actually be able to master singing. One is that all songs are not appropriate for all times of day. Like if you, according to, like, I met an actual Jewish rabbi, and he was saying in the Jewish faith, it's actually not tractable or appropriate to offer the same prayer at the same time of day, at the same season, the same week, the same year, the same decade, the same cycle. There's actual distinction and nuance into when and how it would be appropriate to pray any particular prayer, how you go about that. A song is a lot like a prayer. It may not be auspicious, that means promising, to offer a song at any given date, but it also too may not be possible, because in your body you have something called Ida and Pingala. I talked to another scholar, Morris Brooklyn. I talked to him on the phone of my own choosing. I sought him out, his website, and he made himself available back then, and he quizzed me on a couple of things in our conversation, and he was taken aback that I was familiar with them. One is that he asked me if I know what the word kid means. Like, do you know what this word kid? You're a school bus driver. Do you know what a kid is? And I actually exactly knew what he was insinuating. What a kid refers to, like a halfling, a calfling of some kind, like a goat or a cow, like a small domesticated calfling is a kid. So when you call a human being a kid, etymologically, but also, I made another video that didn't make it to upload, is that All the things, the etymology counts for something because like one reason that a native speaker of a language sounds like a native but also hears that like a fluent is in order to speak fluently you must first hear fluently, but to hear language fluently, a language is so deep is that it's not, so when you say, so say you study a language on an app, right, that like arbitrarily you study a language on the app, you're learning the language, but you're actually not learning the language entirely living, other than however congruent the actual real natives. The only way you can learn a language to be to the only way that you can be a native hearer first and then speaker of another language is you have to hear it spoken for you, someone who is fluent in that language. They're because the language is living, and it's inculcated. Is you acclimate to a language. You are inculcated. You are engendered towards a language. You imbibe a language by exposure to it. Similar to like you have some things you can contact in one go. Like you can contract an STD sometimes in one go, but something like tuberculosis, you actually need a degree of exposure over different batteries of I mean different. You need different episodes of exposure gradually to be inoculated and inculcated into tuberculosis. So you could almost say tuberculosis is more like a vibe than it as in an actual living biological organism. Or you could say that that organism likely it's present in all people, right? Because we're all breathing around the same people all the time. You've been not too far away from a bus or people that just got off a bus like anyone else has, right? So whatever that germ is in its basic form, you probably have that in your body. Like they had these COVID tests back in the day, and they said that those tests, they can be ramped up and they're so sensitive that they can find COVID in damn near anything and anyone. But that's not entirely arbitrary. It's probably possible that you have some degree of anything in you, because they say that as above, so below. So all that constitutes this existence, both in influences, but also in corporal physical reality. To some degree or other, it either exists in your body or corresponds to something that exists in your body. So whatever this tuberculosis thing is, you probably have some degree of that in your body. But exposure to people who really have that, who are really getting back and forth with that, of that lifestyle around other people with that, that may actually bring it out of you more enough for it to be full blown. So I'm just extrapolating. Maybe all people have latent tuberculosis, but enough exposure over time give you full blown tuberculosis. You have all people, places, times, experiences, before, now, after, then, and currently within you, because you are all places and times. You are the universe, all places and times. But you need to have the exposure and contact and meaningful engagement. And so not only must you hear the language spoken, but you must hear it spoken with sincerity. That is, whatever statement someone are making, it must have meaning to them for it to be living, for you to therefore to hear fluently and therefore speak fluently, such that anytime you hear a language, not only are you figuring out what those words mean, but those words also would have to mean what they mean, combined with other words that other people would hear to make those words mean what they mean. And so what I'm saying is, when you're hearing a language, you're hearing an echo, you're hearing a ringing of all the words of that language and all that they have meant, and meant in other people's real lived experiences upon and through and as a function of that language. Is how deep a language is. So when you so etymology, it actually means something because it rings deeper than you can appreciate on your conscious mind. And that's what is being tapped into. Like when you say the F word, not only are you saying the F word, but you're saying what the F word means now, but also has meant in the entire experience of that entire language that would give it that meaning. So every time someone, the F word is probably the last thing that a lot of people heard in this existence. F you, man. Pop. Get out of here, man. Get out of here, man. You effing this and that. And now they're a snowman. The F word is probably the last thing someone heard, but that actual congruence of that history of that word is part of the current in the stream of it. And so that actually is being heard anytime you hear that word spoken for you. But I got off on a little bit of tangent with that. Um, the but so but with singing, like singing is such that you may not actually be able to master it once and for, sorry, but when I was talking to Todd, to Morris Brooklyn, he asked me, do you know what a kid is? And I said a kid refers to an animal, a domesticated animal. So when you call a human being a kid, you're actually just like you can misgender a person. That's also why it'd be significant to misgender a person, because when you misgender a person and you use the wrong etymology to refer to their real lived experience, you're actually affronting both the word you're using, the pronoun, and the person, and the combination or the incongruence, incompatibility, all at once. Is why it would sound egregious, but it's actually the same thing when you call a human being a kid. When you're calling a human being a kid, you're also not only misgendering, but I don't know what to call when you misspecies a person, but whatever it be to call something out of their species, that's what it is when you call a human being a kid. So, and it's actually what's happening in their mind. They're actually being affronted in their mind and mocked and disrespected and low key actually abused in their mind. And when you call a human being a kid, hey kiddo, hey kid, unless you're being cool about it, like Billy the Kid or something like that, with that because the exception proves the rule. But so it's actually appropriate to call a human being a child. And so Morris Brooklyn, he thought that I was spot on when he said that, and that's exactly what he was reaching for. Then we were talking about mantra. I won't talk about mantra a lot in this. Mantra is one of the things that inspired me most about, in life, why I engage with Arthur Allen's work so much, and why I also aspire to be an artist currently. But I can't do justice to the concept of mantra with this video without making it go way long or actually losing wind. As much as I'm long-winded, I would lose wind by being that broad. But he asked me, "Do you actually know a mantra at all? Do you know an actual a living mantra or an actual a sanctioned initiated mantra? Because you're actually somewhat of an initiate if you would actually be if you've actually heard pronounced for you or know the living name of a mantra." And I told him that I'm familiar with the Gayatri mantra, and he was almost that's he was taken aback that I was reading mantra, but it appears at the back of one of Arthur Avalon's books, and that's the benediction for reading that book. According to Arthur Avalon, if you go through the works of Arthur Avalon, he was a knight of England. That's an actual rank of nobility in India, a saint in England, a full fledged rank of nobility. It actually takes another member of nobility to confer nobility to someone. According to Arthur Avalon, if you get through the works of Arthur Avalon, Principles of Tantra 1 and 2, um, uh, um, uh, Maha the Great Liberation, Tantra, Maha Tantra, the Great Liberation, the World as Power, um, uh, uh, the Serpent Power, um, uh, um, he has one on mantra. He has another book on mantra, hymns to Kali. I think that was written with his wife. If you get through the works of Arthur Avalon, that is the canon of Arthur Avalon. It's not a lot of books. It's like between 5 and 10 books, but some of them are voluminous. Thick, like when a book is very thick, that's called a tome. A couple of them are tomes, and a couple of them are just big books. By the time you get through all of his books, and you're versed and now possessed of that learning, um, then at the back of it, he confers a benediction, him too being versed, and him too being nobility, and him too being initiated by gurus and sages in India. I think a couple he actually levels the name of his teacher in one of those books. I can't think of it off the top of my head. That would be an Easter egg, and even a higher point of vintage would be to be familiar with his actual teacher. But I think there might have been a picture of his teacher in one of the books. But his if you get to the back of them, it actually includes the Gayatri mantra in English, just for you to be versed in that mantra, to know the name of it, and to see what those words say. That's actually a degree of attainment. But it would to come to that point, you would have had to get through his works, or you would have to be paid video like this, like I'm doing on here, that you have to get through the end of me talking about a lot of his ideas to come across that name, Gayatri Mantra, and then what you do with that. But according to that person, Morris Brooklyn, is that yes, it is an attainment to be familiar with that, but to actually be fluent with it, again, you'd have to have it pronounced for you, and then you'd also have to live up to that, and so there's a higher degree, but for you to actually be fluent, that is for the mantra to be living in you and as you're now, that's actually one of the highest attainments for an existence, and that's enviable, admirable, enviable, and almost coveted by even personages that are greater than you'd call a human being, according to the face of India. It's actually a point. That's what the greatest in this life is actually. Like if you say you're a rock and roller, right? You do like music. You come across someone and people got a real fetish about like guitars, right? They because no, because some things are an acquired taste, right? You have to learn to enjoy carrots, carrot. delicious, but you have to have a little bit of, you can't just give carrot juice to kids normally under normal circumstances or vegetables. The kids actually like it unless it's an exceptional child. You have some things are an acquired taste. They're excellent. They're the more enjoyable, the more you acquire the taste for enjoying them, such as the guitar itself. So some people have a real sweet, the guitar is a sweet instrument. When it's played well, even someone without a background or a lot of experience of life, they can appreciate what you're saying and what you mean with your guitar. That's the beginning of it speaking to them, which is the beginning of their enjoyment with it also. But that's not the full attainment of enjoyment with it, because that's the introduction in the beginning, so that is something of the attainment of it, but it's still just there's like a story in actually praising Yama Uba. Like it was all you hear like darling baby Judy. The night you left me, Judy, oh how I cried. The day you left me, I thought you'd never say goodbye. Darling Judy, I'm wondering why did you lie to me? All you're singing with all these love songs is you're singing the praises of Yama Uba, who is true love. That's this her, she, lady that is at all these love songs is Yama Uba, true love. But according to Japan, but she's very haggard looking, and the only thing that actually compels her is her praises of her own, because it's rare that she actually hears someone pronounce a song of love and mean it well. And